get licenses for every import, all that's gone. But I think there are many other hurdles that people still feel are holding up pace of movement. Environmental clearances, state-level clearances, pollution clearances. You know, the late Mr. L.K. Jha, I was a great admirer of his, and he was one of the early advocates for economic reform. I met him a lot when he was economic advisor to Prime Minister Mr. Rajiv Gandhi. And, you know, he used to mention these things then, in the mid-80s, that, you know, we have tremendous potential and we must kind of open up. Now, I think he used to say that India is a vehicle with 14 brakes, all of them slammed on. And relaxing 2 or 3 of them is not going to make much difference. So I think what has happened is, of course, we've relaxed more than 2 or 3. We've relaxed a lot. But there are many other hurdles which still make life more difficult. And I think we need to do something about it.
And you know, other issue that concerns all of us. In fact, this is one issue which is really concerning macro level issues as well as really a micro level issue. Is a delivery mechanism. Basically, this will actually improve our expenditure management, which can bring about better delivery for the people, which can actually reduce corruption. There are, many dimensions and many spin-off benefits one could derive from this improving delivery mechanism. It was music to my ears when the present Prime Minister, when he actually inaugurated his own office as a Prime Minister, he started talking about it. And somewhere down the line, this is just lost. Do you think this is something which is no longer on the agenda of the government and Planning Commission as an important institution, which can actually bring about a change into this? Because I think this itself can reduce our fiscal deficit also, because there is a limitation on which we can raise revenues. But expenditure, the same amount of expenditure can get much better benefit. Then that itself will bring about better results. And common man will be happy, because when at the end of it, if the quality of service improves, I think he's more than happy. You know, we are opening hospitals, but not necessarily he's getting a health delivery system from there. We are improving schools, but not necessarily good education. So can we not focus on that, and why this actually important issue was lost?
I completely agree with you that this is extremely important, and actually both the finance minister and I at various times have said that we should stop trying to measure our plan schemes by the amount of expenditure we do. We should look at whether they're delivering end results. Now, what I would say is that many very important steps have been taken, which I believe will improve delivery, which I think have already improved delivery in certain areas, but is going to take several years before you see the full effect. Now, a couple of examples. First, I think the government now is shifting its focus away from direct production of goods and services, where it is producing goods and services, competing with the private sector. So basically, the competition takes care of the service provision being efficient. But the things it is doing are things that you can't leave to the market. Education, health, rural drinking water, rural infrastructure, and of course infrastructure in general. Now, I think in these areas, there is evidence that delivery systems are being subjected to new methods of delivery. Take decentralization. If you create accountability, let's say a primary health center should be made accountable to the local elected body, and the primary school should be made responsible to the panchayat, for example, or the Gram Sabha. This will lead to an improvement in the delivery of services. Now, the point is that we have, 600,000 villages, and even if in 10% of the villages the schools are not functioning well, then we have 60,000 schools that are not functioning well.
Absolute is a big
absolute number is huge. And if anybody wants to look at examples of failure, there'll be many. But what is interesting is there are many examples of outstanding success. And I think we just need to convince people that this is going to expand. Now, if you look at some of the hard results, even take an independent survey like the ASER survey, which Pratham does, on the kind of effectiveness of education. How many children in class 5 can read what they should be able to read in class 2, and can they do sums that they should have been able to do in class 3?
Quality assessment.
Actual independent quality assessment, not based on the marks given by the teachers. You find that in one sense you find that the numbers are not good enough, but the good news is that over time the numbers are improving. Secondly, in
But
some
not improving fast enough.
No, I agree with that. I completely agree with that. But interestingly, in some of the weakest states, I mean, which we traditionally think are backward, particularly in the Hindi heartland, the rate of improvement is actually quite good. So maybe there is something happening. And I think the real question is, what is not happening is progress is not as fast as expectations. And one of the good things that has happened in the last 5 or 6 years, I meet many MPs, and this constantly pointed out to me, that look, in a world in which opportunities are being opened up to those who are educated, if we want to spread the benefits of education, the quality of education must improve. Now, not only that, but this raises the issue that maybe the quality of rural education is improving, but if the quality of urban education is improving more, then the relative difference between rural and urban education can be widening. Yeah. And people are now saying, look, I want my children to have as good an opportunity as the children in urban areas, and they're right. Yeah. So the system is under pressure.
Again, another issue that we always talk about, and we rarely act on it, is the failure of governance. In fact, this is something has now become a cliche, so people no longer really pay any much attention to it. And the governance and the government seems to have completely divorced from each other. So government don't deliver, as a result of which now we are seeing a huge phenomenon of Naxalism rising all over the country. Maybe 1/3 of the districts out of 600 are infected in partly or fully by this. So the governance failure seems to be one of the biggest challenge that is now facing us. Now, do you think something on that we are really working on it, or is it something now we have accepted as a fait accompli, nothing can be done? And in fact, the other dimension of this is that every time a government goes into election, the incumbent government has a very good chance of losing than winning only because of the failure of the governance. So that means people want better governance. So they are actually telling you time and again, we want better governance, and the governments fail continuously, repeatedly on that count. So something is going to be done, or this is something now we accepted as...
It absolutely has to be done. And I would say, by the way, that there are governments that get re-elected. So it's not the case that every time a government doesn't get re-elected.
Few get re-elected.
Most of them lose. But it's a very important signal, because I think it's a correct thing. I mean, most people in the rest of the world are extremely impressed by the fact that in the reality, the fact that Indian democracy is real is best demonstrated by the fact that people change governments. If people don't change governments, and we have had countries where the same government gets a 98% vote, nobody believes it, right? So now the real issue is, you mentioned Naxalism. It is true that we need, I mean, it's sometimes viewed as a security problem, and it is a security problem, and it has to be addressed from that dimension also. But I think the government is very clear that there is also, the system is not delivering economic development in these areas the way it should. Yeah. Now, the
not
solution...
meeting the people's expectations.
Not even meeting the government's expectation. I think in these districts, let's face it, we have not, and these are states that are run by different parties, so it's not a party position at all. It is a basic problem. These were the most backward parts of the country, and I think they are being brought into the development process. We need to do a lot more. Some of these things we have to do are elementary. Putting in the basic infrastructure, building the roads, improving the schools, creating a basic health system. But I think that in some of these areas there is progress taking place. I think all the evidence we have suggests that when you build roads and you link an area up through roads, you open it up. You create economic opportunities. And in the rest of the country, where roads have gone, development has followed. So I think many of these areas we've not done that. And certainly education and health and agriculture are very
crucial. These are the issues which we really need to focus on, and we'll keep discussing the issues. Don't go away. We are talking to Dr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia, the person who is actually in charge of planning of India, the Deputy Chairman Planning Commission, and he's talking to us about the priorities of the Planning Commission and what really we should be doing more in terms of meeting the people's expectations. So we'll come back soon after a short break. Don't go away. This is Suresh Prabhu waiting for you to come back. So welcome back to Top Shot, a program in which we are talking to Dr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia, Deputy Chairman, Planning Commission, on issues related to planning and other issues. So Dr. Ahluwalia, we are saying that healthcare, education, and these are the important things. But one of the important things seems to be agriculture. You know, consistently we have been seeing the share of agriculture into GDP is falling. Now it's just 18%. And population dependent on agriculture is not going down. So do you think, first of all, we need a multi-pronged strategy, but also to make sure that people from agriculture are absorbed into either services or manufacturing? Is it something that is going to happen over a period of time? And what are the priorities for agriculture?
Well, there are a lot of different questions
I know.
So let me make one or 2 points.
Yeah.
First, it's true that the share of agriculture in GDP, as you say, is falling. But you know, this is not abnormal. Actually, with economic development, it will fall. Agriculture at most can grow at 4, maybe 4.5%. We hope that GDP will grow at 9%. So if GDP grows at 9%, agriculture at 4.5%, the share of agriculture will fall. And when we become a developed country, it will become very, very small. The real issue is, are people moving out of agriculture?
Yeah.
Now, you know, you often hear this number, 52% of the population depend on agriculture for the majority of their income. You know, there's a little bit of a statistical thing here, because we count according to majority. So let's say if in 1970, 52% were 80% dependent on agriculture, we say they're dependent on agriculture. 10 years later, if they're 70% dependent on agriculture, we say they're dependent on agriculture. Until they become less than 50% dependent on agriculture, they will be shown as being dependent on agriculture. But actually what's happening is, over time, the share of non-agricultural income in all these people is rising. And in rural areas, there's a lot of non-agricultural economic activity taking place. But having said all that, let me not try to make this an excuse. I believe we are not shifting people out of agriculture into productive non-agricultural activity as fast as we should be doing. And I think this is critically dependent on the rate of growth we can sustain. If we could maintain the 9% growth rate over an extended period of time, then you will see this shift occurring. Now remember, the last information we have, if you go by censuses, we don't know after 2001. We will find out by 2010 or 2011 how much of a decline has taken place. But the decline has been occurring. However, it is true that the rate of urbanization in India is lower than it has been in other countries. But I expect that in the next 10, 20 years, this is going to accelerate. And more people will shift out of agriculture into non-agriculture, not all of it in urban areas. A lot of it will be non-agriculture in rural areas, but also there will be a big increase in the urban population. Are we ready for it? There are huge challenges there. And we need to, a lot of our long-term planning should be addressing this question. Are we ready for this shift? First of all, skills. I mean, you need to make sure that the people have the skills that are needed to move out of the relatively simple kind of activities into the new non-agricultural activities that are taking place. And I think we have, you know, the government has launched the Skill Development Mission, and that's very much aimed at completely revamping our system of skill development, not by giving people long courses. We need a multiplicity of small courses.
Vocational training.
Whatever.